Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are watching us from the Pan-African Leadership Center. This is episode 7, and what we promote here is the Pan-African youth and women leaders here, debunking myths and uh, deframing African narratives through the Afrocentric perspective. Today, we are able to have someone that I was very honored to be able to meet and introduce. Um, I will say that the parts of it that will make sense later is I'm currently 38 and my birthday's March 24th. That will make sense later in this. That being said, I would like to introduce you to our guest today. Um, Forgive me for looking down for a bit, but I'm going to be reading her introduction. So Dr. Patricia Rodney, uh, she's a PhD, an MPH, and SRN. I'll go through that shortly. Dr. Rodney has lived and worked in Guyana, Barbados, England, Tanzania, Canada, and the United States. As a seasoned public health professional, her career spans the disciplines of health, adult education and literacy, social work in women, gender, and development. During her 15-year academic tenure at Morehouse School of Medicine in Atlanta, Georgia, United States of America, between the years of 1995 through 2010, she was promoted to MPH, Program Director, uh, Professor, Department of Community Health and Prevention Medicine, and Assistant Dean for Public Health Education. Dr. Rodney is the author of The Caribbean State Healthcare of Women and Assess of Barbados and Grenada, 1979 to 1983. African World Press, 1988, and has published several peer-reviewed academic articles. Dr. Rodney is currently an adjunct professor, Department of Community Health and Preventive Medicine at Morehouse School of Medicine. Since 2011, Dr. Rodney has been a CEO of Partners in Health, Education, and Development, which is an internal development consulting organization. She has worked in Ghana, Nigeria, Tanzania, Uganda, Botswana, Lesotho, and South Africa. Dr. Rodney is also the CEO of the Walter Rodney Foundation, which can be found on www.walterrodneyfoundation.org, which was established by the Rodney family in 2006 in Atlanta, Georgia. Dr. Rodney is a mother of sorry if I'm correct me, Shakai Rodney, who is an entrepreneur, Kanini Rodney Phillips, who's a physician, and Asha T. Rodney, an attorney at law, and she's a grandmother of Asia, Kai, Sky, and Apid. You're going to help me with that one. Apedia. Please help me with that pronunciation. To go back to her accolades, she was a physician in 2000. Got her PhD 2004 at the Sociology and Adult Education in the United States of Toronto. The MPH was in 1988 from the Health Education and Health Promotion from the University of Atlanta, a BBS from Social Work from the University of Uganda, and the SRN at 1965, state registered nurse from Royal Northern Hospital in London, England. So without further ado, and if you can correct me on some names, I would be honored to bring up our guest, Dr. Patricia Rodney. How are you?
Good morning.
Good morning. So help me with everything I butchered there. Help me with the names, please.
Okay, which ones? My
Your
children's
granddaughter, your children and your granddaughters, grandkids.
Patricia Rodney is my son,
Mhm.
Kanini and Asha. And
Mhm.
my grandchildren are Asia, Kai, Sky, and Apidra.
A Petra, that's the one I know.
Apidra.
A Petra, a Petro,
Apidra. Mm.
Petra. Okay, Petra. Okay, I definitely messed that up.
Mm.
I appreciate it because my name gets, I always make sure I get names right. First of all, again, it's an honor to be in front of you. I am so unfortunate, though, to be born when I was, because your husband's work was taken from us well before I got to be here. But it also shows how we stand on the works of you and him alike for people who merit the fight in doing better for the diaspora and for our community. But my first question to you would be, to those that may not know or familiar with you and Walter Rodney, can you give the audience a description of you, Walter? What brought you together, your accomplishments, your relationships? How did you meet?
That's a lot in one question.
I
Anyway,
know, right? I'm sorry.
both Walter and I were born in Georgetown, Guyana, and grew up and went to school in Guyana. Actually, we were born the same year, 1942. I was born in February, so I'm older than he is by a month.
Oh,
February
yeah.
the 18th, and he was born March the 23rd.
I get
Um,
along with Aquarius. Yeah.
yes, Walter was very well known growing up for his skills, both academic and debating skills.
Mm.
He went to Queen's College, a premier school in Guyana,
Mm.
and then went on to the University of the West Indies. I took a different route. I went to high school, finished high school, and then taught for a while at primary school, and then emigrated to England to do nursing.
Mm.
In 1960, Walter had already gone on to UWI in September of 1960 and came home to Guyana for the Christmas holidays, which most students abroad did. And we met, even though I knew of him and knew about him, we never really met officially. We both went to a party, a house party, and we
Mm.
met at that party in 1960. He left in December to go back to Jamaica, and I left in January 1961 for London. And so we corresponded over that 3-year period, writing letters. Um,
Miss
and
those
he
days.
came up to England in 1963 to do graduate work at the University of London School of Oriental and African Studies. And we started dating. And, excuse me, in 1965, we got married. And 1966, my son Shaka was born on the same day that Walter got his PhD. So Shaka was born
Wow.
at noon that day, and Walter was defending his thesis at 2 p.m. that day. So, um,
How
and
powerful.
yes. And then in later 1966, Walter was offered a chance to take up an academic position at the University of Dar es Salaam in Tanzania. So
Mm.
Walter left soon after Shaka was born for Tanzania. And Shaka and I left about 3 weeks later for Tanzania.
Mhm.
So we lived in Tanzania for that academic period, 1966 to 1967. That was my first
Mhm.
trip to Africa, and specifically to East Africa. And that's one of my favorite places in the world. Also, because both of my daughters were also born in
Right there.
Tanzania.
Yeah. That's all. I was just going to ask you the transition and how did that feel? I was just going to say that must have been a beautiful transition in Africa there too. Um, my next question to you is, I particularly come from a family that um, has two parents who were activists. They came from Haiti, and they, came to the islands and did a lot for Haitians coming here, Haitians abroad, so on. Um, but one of the things I see about having advocate parents is that the work my father did kind of gets overshadowed um, of my mother's work, where a lot of that was hand in hand. And of course, all the work she did at home to care of us. But she actually started programs and piloted things that branched off my father's, it's developing a center. What in your life, and it was funny to actually then, when I wrote this, hear you say some things, but what in your life do you feel has played that role for you? May I ask you to explain a role that you've worked in with Walter, or something that just we don't know that you were vividly a part of? And I like how you said you went on afterward to connect and be solid with your own, purpose, right? So I'm just
Mhm.
wondering what your works in with Walter was, and then you speaking about working there after, because the profound work he did was amazing, but can definitely get overshadowed by the counterpart, right? How did
Yeah.
you explain
Well,
that like to me?
I think for most women, that is the reality. Whether you're married to an activist, a politician, women's work is often overlooked and undervalued.
Mm,
I think that without women supporting those men, they would never have time and the energy and the support to do their work that they've
that's true.
achieved. I was not a member of the Working People's Alliance, but I supported Walter's academic and his political work by
Mm,
freeing up spaces for him. For example, when we lived in Tanzania, Walter worked. The university is like 7 to 10 miles away from the city of Dar es Salaam. So it's
mm,
very secluded, isolated from the realities of the city. I worked in the city as a public health nurse with the Dar es Salaam City Council. So lots of my contacts, my friends, were what I would call Mswahili, real Tanzanian people. While on the campus, they were mostly expatriates. So
mm,
I was
mm.
the one who kind of meshed those relationships together for Walter. Um, and that's true throughout my work. I never saw my work as political. I saw my work as service work, whatever I did, whether it was working with women, children. Um, in Jamaica, again, I worked at the University of the West Indies Hospital. So wherever we were, I worked in the health field or public health field. Um, so
That,
I think that women, because our roles are so minimized, that the onus is on us, and for us to make sure that our daughters are educated, they're independent, and that they have a voice. That's not to say they're not going to complement or support what their partners are doing, but it must be that mutual thing. They must come to the table with something. And so
mm,
it's important for us to focus on the education of our daughters. I know a long time ago, people focus on educating their sons and marrying off their daughters. That's not the reality
right,
of
right.
society, that we
It's
all
not.
play a role in society. And so we all need to have an education that we use in the service of our communities.
I couldn't agree more, especially with the fact that the mentality of the woman raises that child as well. You know what I mean? So you want
Yes.
to strengthen it as much as it possibly can be. And it just resonates so much with me. And to hear you say that, being a person who's a woman who, in like my relationship, I'm the one that's the advocate, the political center, the this and that, you know, and he's quietly my support. But I watched like I said, I grew up in this where both my parents did amazing, but even in his passing, it's like my father just always overshadowed all the brilliance my mom's still doing to this day. You know what I mean? So
Yes.
it spoke to me. I wrote it and then I watched you speak about it, and I was like, so my next question to you is this: what for you was most inspiring about Walter? What speech, book, action, struggle made you admire the man that you called your husband?
One of the things that impressed me about Walter was his humility. He's a very gentle man, and his love for family. I remember when even before he proposed for us to get married, we talked about our parents, who are both working class parents in Guyana, and he assisted his younger siblings in terms of their school, from his stipend that he got as a student in London, and he also did extra teaching to earn money. And he talked about us combining our resources and making sure that our parents were well looked after. To me, that was mind-blowing. And so, yes, he definitely came with a lot of qualities that I admired very much and wanted to be with someone like that. I find all his works to be of the highest standard of scholarship. He did not take shortcuts or was not writing to impress anybody. His work is about providing knowledge as a tool for liberation. His book, A History of the Guyanese Working Peoples, which was published posthumously in 1981 by Johns Hopkins University Press, for me is the most inspiring work, because he was writing about the perseverance, abilities, and sacrifices of working people that he admired and dedicated his life to. I think those are the ones you asked me, right? Yes.
Yeah. I'm just taking my own notes down. So forgive me, my pencil ran somewhere from me, so I had to find a way to take my own notes down. So that being said, Rodney spoke, and you said something I'm going to bring back to, but Rodney spoke greatly about about government and infrastructure in Africa, and how the structures needs to change, and it's relying on the very systems that keep Africa from being developed properly. Where do you see Africa and the Caribbean now? How far have we come? How far must we go? What need do you see greatest?
Well, Rodney in his work and his ongoing work, he always critiqued the bankruptcy of post-colonial governments and leaders in both Africa and the Caribbean. That was one of the reasons he was banned from Jamaica in 1968, because he spoke to the needs of Black people and Black working class people in particular. And that was why he was assassinated in Guyana, because his whole work, his political and academic work, was about justice and equity for the Guyanese people. Indo-Guyanese population and Afro-Guyanese population, how you bring those two people together in order for a government to function effectively. Because without the unity of the working classes, the system is not going to be able to develop. I don't have a recipe for what happens in Africa and the Caribbean, but I know that young people need to be involved, workers need to be involved, and academics who have the knowledge need to be able to serve and to educate those communities. So it's a joint effort. Workers all over the world are protesting what's going on in terms of governance in Africa and the Caribbean. We've seen what happened in Haiti recently, that people were out in the street protesting prior to that assassination.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't about the assassination, it was people were feeling that the society was not serving their best needs. We see the coup d'etat occurring in Africa all over again, which is not a solution. But obviously, there's discontent in terms of what people are experiencing. We know and we see there's a new scramble for Africa, and that all the resources from Africa are being taken out of Africa. So a section of the African population, the petty bourgeoisie or elite, are doing very well. They are very comfortable. They don't have any problems, but the mass of the people are not benefiting from those resources. So it's going to take solidarity across the globe for people to be able, Black people in particular, to be able to unite. It's not whether you're Haitian, I'm Guyanese, you're Trinidadian. We're all in the diaspora, and how do we struggle together? Because a struggle takes everybody, and struggle united can never fail. And that support, we need to not just talk about a work solidarity, but how do we really provide meaningful support to those struggles in Africa and the rest of the world.
Profound. So I do have another question for you, but I am going to ask to interject because of an audience question that I think is fair. We would like to hear about more of your work. And I did read an intro on all the claims that you did. But can you take us through your life, being now a single mom? It'll go back into the next question I have, which will relate, but I'm going to omit one just because of this question asked, and I think the audience is interested in you. So can you take us into your life? What happened to your world after the assassination of your husband and the father of your children? But you didn't just stop there, and you started well before. So take us through your work.
Well, I'll start with after I graduated from nursing school in London, I worked in Tanzania as a public health nurse. I worked in Jamaica as a nurse. And then we went on to Guyana. My own work has always been interrupted because of childbearing, child rearing, moves, and all that. But once we got to Guyana, I thought, okay, we'll be in a safe place for a long period of time. I can continue my education. So I was accepted at University in Guyana in a diploma program they had in social work. And I graduated from that program. 2 students who got the highest awards. We went on to Jamaica for a year to finish our first degree. So I took a year off Walter and my parents and my in-laws looked after the children while I went to Jamaica to study. I came back to Guyana, and of course, I also was denied a job when I came back from studying. I was told I was either overqualified for a job or I would get the job and then the administration would step in and I would no longer have a job. So when Walter was assassinated on June the 13th, 1980, soon after we moved to Barbados. And in Barbados, I worked with the government, I worked with a parastatal organization, and then I worked with an organization called Women and Development Unit, which was a program of the University of the West Indies, what we call an extramural program. So I worked a lot with grassroots women's organizations. And the two countries I worked in was Grenada and Dominica. And that's how I was able to use one of those countries in comparing the healthcare systems for my thesis. I stayed in Barbados for 9 years, and then we emigrated to Canada. And in Canada, I worked and studied. I applied to the graduate program at the Institute, OISE, Institute of Studies in Education at the University of Toronto in their sociology department and a minor in adult education. So I got my PhD while working. I worked for an international organization called International Council for Adult Education. And that was a national, international organization. So we worked with regional organizations throughout the Caribbean, Asia, Latin America, Arab states, Europe, anywhere where adult education was taught, we worked with them. And so that's how I was able to get my expertise in literacy and adult education. While working in Canada, I worked in Canada for both NGOs and I worked for a government program in Canada. And then, but before that, when I was working in Barbados at WAND, I got a fellowship to study public health at Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia. And the reason, excuse me, the reason I chose public health was because the programs we did at WAN focused on giving women skills so they could be economically dependent. But what we failed to do was focus on the women and their health and well-being. So that's where my expertise came in. And that's why I did a public health program. While living in Atlanta, I made several friends and colleagues during the time I spent here. And so I returned to Barbados and then emigrated to Canada and kept those relationships. Relationships are key. Yeah. And so we always need to nurture those relationships. Yeah. After I got an offer to come to Atlanta, Georgia, to Morehouse School of Medicine to help in the development of the first public health program at a historically Black college and university. So we were the first program to start. And eventually, as I said, I became the director of that program. I was promoted to professor. And then I was appointed the first dean of public health education at Morehouse School of Medicine. And during the period I was at Morehouse School of Medicine, I always exposed my students whose concentration was in international health to do a period in the country abroad, because you can't do global health or international health without having that experience. So all my students went abroad, whether it was Ghana, Nigeria, Brazil. They went all over the world. Cuba, I took students to Cuba to to give them that broad experience. If you're going to work in public health, you have to have a broad experience of people's lives. And then after I retired, I started my own consultancy, Partners in Health Education and Development, and I worked in several parts of Africa. And then the family started the Walter Rodney Foundation, which is what I continue to do to make sure his legacy is ongoing, that we share his work, and that young people read his work, because his ideas are not static ideas. They're ideas that need to be built on, principles that need to be built on. And 2022, it will be 50 years of how Europe underdeveloped Africa, and it's still the most significant work to come out about the underdevelopment of the region. Recently, I was reading a book which I'm going to order. It's called Imperialism, Neoliberalism, and a New Scramble for Africa by Lee Wengraf. And he talked about the continuing poverty of the African working class, African peasants, while Africa is doing very well in terms of getting back some of those resources. They are going to a certain group of people. And so the masses are not benefiting from the resources that they produce, that they work on. And so his work to me is just an expansion of what Rodney was talking about since in the 70s. And that's why I say Rodney's work is very relevant. People need to read it, especially young people. You can't go into struggle without having a basic understanding of where we came from, and where we are going, or else you'll be lost. We'll just have uprisings or, different protests, but we're not really going to be able to resolve the problems that we face. Organizations with young people such as Black Lives Matter is very important, because that message resonated across the globe. But how do we sustain that momentum is extremely important. And I know that's a long way of answering the question.
No, it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. It's actually great and profound. And I personally, being in the demographic of millennials, I actually feel that for us to do what we need to hear from you guys. We need to literally sit back and talk to the older baby boomers and telling them about, like, that's our guidance right there. That's what we need to hear. Elders, yes. But I just was trying to honor it, and like, yes, but this is like walking libraries for us right now. You know what I mean? And I think for people who are listening, I think I've called up on this platform, not directly this channel, but our platform before, for the millennials to really listen and understand and hear, right? It kills me that I never heard of him, but to hear, like, this is just like another, Marcus Garvey, Malcolm X, Jean-Jacques Dessalines, like he should be right up there in those names, with his wife. Outside of the works that you yourself have written, and and the ones that your husband has done, have you found anything else to be profound in your developments and in your creating of mindsets?
I love to read. I read everything. I like historical novels, biographies, novels written by women. The people who are most influential in my life were my parents and my oldest sister, in terms of growing up and the values they provided, which sustained me when I went off to live in England by myself. Professionally, lots of people, too many to call, who were there to guide me, but also for me to throw out ideas and for them to engage me in the work they were doing. But my children, I think, have the most profound effect on me. I'm very, that to me is the most important aspect of my life. A PhD, yes, but raising 3 children as a single mother, I have the greatest respect for single mothers, that my children have come out as nice people, not so much what they've done professionally, which is amazing, but they're nice people. I think that's most important, that you're a good person, whatever else you do in life, that you're somebody who can engage with people from all walks of life. And of course, my grandchildren, who I'm very proud of, and I'm sure my husband would have been the happiest engaging with them. He loves children. He wrote children's books. And to see them grow up, and hoping that they grow up in a world that's different from ours, and that they're seen as human beings and what they can contribute to society.
Can I, if possible, and it's actually going to go back into being you, but if possible, for an audience like me who wasn't there, could you take us through the day your husband was assassinated? How can we do best in honoring his memory? What would you think Walter would think today?
Well, Walter would still be doing the work that he was doing. Hopefully, Guyana would have been in a better place if he was alive, because he made a big impact in terms of bringing the races together in the short time that we lived in Guyana, from 1974 to 1980, when he was assassinated. So I think he would have continued to do that work. Walter had shortly returned from Zimbabwe, where he went to the celebration of the Zimbabwe independence. He was invited by Robert Mugabe. And while there, he was offered a 1-year special commission to write a history of Zimbabwe. So that morning of June the 13th, Walter and I talked about taking up that offer. And that in itself was significant, because Walter has received offers from all around the world, all universities, and has turned them down because he wanted to stay in Guyana and contribute to a country who had supported his education. So I myself was quite surprised that he said that we should take up the offer, because he felt the children and I needed a break, and he also needed to analyze and reflect on the work of the WPA. I took the day off from work because I just started a job in May at the University of Guyana on a special assignment, because I couldn't get a full-time appointment at the university because of political reasons. But I was a research fellow for one of the professors at the university. So I took that Friday off, and Walter and I did a lot of chores before we picked up the children from school. For example, he had borrowed some books from the Indian High Commission when he was writing the book Lakshmi Out of India, which is one of the children books he wrote so that the children of Guyana can begin to understand the culture of each other and begin to understand and respect each other better. He had finished Kofi Badu. And so we took those books we had borrowed back to the Indian High Commission. And then we did some other chores and picked up the children from school at 1:00 that day. We returned home, and that evening the kids had kids always had lots of activities. So we only had one car, a little green Mini Minor. So we had worked out that Walter would drop us off. My youngest daughter, Asha, had a fundraising film show at her school. And the two older kids, Shaka and Kanini, were going to a farewell party for a school friend whose parents worked for the UN and was being transferred to Barbados. So we had agreed that he would drop us off and then he would pick us up that evening. As it turned out, about 5 o'clock in the evening, my brother-in-law, Walter's youngest brother, and the only living person to the assassination of Walter Rodney, came by the house. He dropped by the house. And so he said he would take Walter on the appointment that Walter had to meet this person, Gregory Smith, at 7. So Walter and I bid each other and the children goodbye. And we said, see you at home just after 7. Just after 7. We see you at home for dinner. And that was the last time I saw him. Because at 8 o'clock that night, he was assassinated by an anti-personnel bomb, which was given to Donald to give to Walter as a walkie-talkie.
You've also stated that if we know this much and how this was mangled, and the fact that the family itself still to this day hasn't got the proper acclaims from his death, and to hear this.
Well, I would say that this year, June the 6th, I think it was, the current government, as you know, there was a commissioner of inquiry in 2014, and I asked people to read the commission of inquiry report because it's very clear who assassinated Rodney. It's in the report that the government was implicated, not just the government, the prime minister at the time, Forbes Burnham, the army, the police were all implicated in his assassination. So I encourage people to read that report. But this year, every year on June, we have an annual symposium to honor him and to make sure his legacy is carried on. This year, June, we were organizing a program around seeking justice for Rodney again. And just the week before, the government of Guyana, the current government of Guyana, actually accepted the findings from that report. And there were several things that happened. When an inquest happened 8 years after Rodney was murdered, on the death certificate, they put died by misadventure.
Yeah.
And the second thing was that he was unemployed. The government stated that they would change those to reflect that Rodney was assassinated and that he wasn't unemployed. He's a professor of history. So those things are in the works to be changed, that his children's books will be available to kids in the schools, that his works, which are not in Guyana or not accessible to lots of people in Guyana, that we will make sure that the library and the university have copies of his books, and also to rename, because the government had named the archives, the National Archives, the Walter Rodney Archives. And then the Forbes Burnham government, which had a different name, APNU, took down the Walter Rodney sign, that it was they're going back to the original name, the National Archives. This government, again, has reinstated that archives are the Walter Rodney Archives. These are small steps in terms of restitution for the family. And there's a lot of work still to be done to ensure that these things are done. But how do we make sure that the family receives compensation? Rodney was killed when he was 38 years old. He was assassinated.
That's
A
my age
planned
now.
assassination. So you've deprived a family of a father, of economic stability, and also his insurance policy. We were never able to receive that because if you die by misadventure, it means that you had caused your own death. So financially, emotionally, any way you could think of, his life has impacted my family.
I can imagine, and it almost like breeds a continual disregard and disrespect to the family to this day, which is even more heartening to hear. Um, it's even quite frustrating to not know this name prior to, especially the type of person that I look to be. But I'm glad it's in front of me now. So let me ask you, um, if what message would you leave for the current activists of the continent of Africa or the indigenous and Aboriginal people abroad? Do you see there could be like the, what was it again? I just lost the name. The free, do you see a working class alliance happening now?
Sure, I would say that young people need to learn how to engage and to listen. That's the key, listening, because sometimes we think we always have the answers when the answers are within communities and working peoples. They know their problems, their issues better than we do. So listening to them and grounding with them. Walter Rodney's groundings with my brothers is a methodology, is a practical way of learning from the community and assisting the community in articulating those needs. So, understanding our history, the richness we bring, because I think a lot of times we are not confident enough in ourselves because we don't know our history, the rich history we've come from.
Right.
We've read all the Eurocentric literature that tells us that we were slaves. We were enslaved, not
Right.
slaves. It's a difference. Enslaved people. So we were brought against our will to these different places. But we need to know that, understand, and history needs to be taught at all levels
Yeah.
of our educational system. Because if we don't know our history, we don't know where we are or where we want to go. So,
I'm gonna walk into again.
yeah, just gaining that knowledge, reading, empowering ourselves with knowledge. Knowledge is power. And sharing that knowledge with our communities. And in lots of places, our communities need help in terms of literacy. Organizations getting together. We have environmental organization, we have health organization, we have women's organization, we have literacy. All those organizations need to come together because we're dealing with one human being who are experiencing all these different issues in their lives. How do we connect and make sure that our message is one message and it resonates with the people we say we're working on their behalf? And I think a lot of support needs to be given to indigenous local organizations. You know, nobody should be coming to tell us how we resolve issues in our community. We know that best. They can provide the resources, but they don't have to be the ones transmitting those messages. We need to be the ones transmitting those messages in our communities, because working class people will only come together when they trust us. trust is a huge factor.
I believe that.
Yeah.
I believe that. And I'm glad you said that. And you said a couple of things before, too, that I grew up with, again, two parents, but they always called it servitude. Like, I don't even like calling myself a leader. I'm a servant. I'm in the practice of servitude. So I love you saying that because, again, my parents were older. My father just passed last year at 79.
I'm so sorry.
My mom, yeah, my mom is 70 now. So so I just love that I was raised by them. But I when I hear servant, I'm like, okay, they get what we're doing, right? There were some questions, and I don't want to keep your time too long. But there's questions that ask like, could you ask her what library or book could you ask to give library references in how we can obtain historical knowledge in the Caribbean?
Just do a search. The internet is a wonderful source for searching anything. It's easier now for people than before. And there's lots of stuff out there, and you have to decide. Some of the resources are not the best, but you have to look. There are lots of writers throughout the Caribbean that you can read about the Caribbean, read about politics. As I said, Walter's works are available from Verso Press. There's a whole source. I mean, I'm sitting in a library here with so many things we can read. I'm reading Richard Wright, the man who lived underground, Du Bois. I mean, there's so many things that people can be reading. Yeah, and if you want to start with Rodney, I would start with Groundings with My Brothers, because as a collection of speeches is easier for people to get to know his work before you go to the more complex works.
I just want to answer this question. I am very much a Black American woman. I'm so true. I don't know, but I am. So forgive me for my naivete in anything, but I'm also a Haitian American woman. But forgive me on my naivete because I was actually born March 24th, 1983. So this happened 3 years prior to me. But you learn, even now growing up, like you learn about Tucson, but finding out about Dessalines and Bookman and Macamdale and all these people are coming up now, Felicite, like, and then how it links to like a Marcus Garvey and and I was just like, oh, like this was like Guyana's Malcolm X, like, and I think that's actually quite again systematic to do that, right? Like to make sure, and this is why, like, if we lose our libraries and not obtain, I think one of the things that we on our other platform here, we're talking about rites of passage, and even talking to you, I feel this is part of that rites of passage and getting the information from you that will then throw me into books that you can say like, yes, but I was here, I saw it this way, you know what I mean? Go through this way. They might be giving you a different perception from a Eurocentric look or however, you know? So
I think book clubs are a good way of reading literature, and it doesn't always have to be a novel, but to read, if you're reading along with other people, if you like that, it's very helpful. Take a chapter, discuss the chapter, but there's a lot of work to be done in terms of building our knowledge. Yeah.
I will say the one thing, not to keep long because we're coming tough to our closing, but I am still to the point that even in my reading, like how you're behind you, I'm still very much, I need the book. I need to smell the paper. I need to flick. I'm not good with the Kindle or being on screen. Like it throws me off.
Neither am I. I like reading, holding
book.
paper. Yeah.
Yeah, I like literally the smell of the book. Like it's just a little bit a thing for me.
Yeah.
So with your books and all you've done, I would love to leave the audience with a way to find you or follow you if they have more questions or if we can engage. I know my connection here, of course, as a correspondent with the United States of Africa and the Pan-African Network, but I'm also, with the Haitian American Collaborative, and we try to do exactly that: find these organizations, collaborate, and bring them to the space and places they need to be. So through here, through us, or through ever, I hope that we can have you, because we need the mentorship of educated elder minds who understood and went through.
People can always contact me through the Walter Rodney Foundation. That's where requests are sent to me. My other email is my working email is partnered health education and development. That's another partnerhead@gmail.com. That's my working email.
Okay, guys. And you said something last that I really want to bring back. And then I will let you go. But all this was so strong for you. And even how you speak of your husband, watching your video, the work you did. Black Girl Magic is not even is shimmer to you and what you've accomplished with your head held so high. But in those moments when it was hard, let's say if I was the 38 you, what would you say to her now in how you in your 70s see and feel what you've went through?
Oh my gosh. You dig deep inside of you. I probably didn't even know that I had that strength and resilience, but I had 3 young children to raise. And so that was my focus. How do I ensure that my children are safe and that they receive a good education, they're a safe place? And that's what Barbados provided for us, a home, a safe place to be. And healing came very late. Healing is not automatic. It's gradual. And so you live each day. You never know what each day is going to bring, but you have to prepare to face it. I had 3 children in 3 different schools, 3 different PTAs, all different activities. I had a job, so it was continuous, and perhaps that's what kept me going, that I was so busy making sure that they were okay, that I put my own healing on the back burner, which in itself is not a good thing, but you do what you have to do at that time. And so together, I think, we were able to come out of this in a better space. That pain will never go away. That pain of losing my husband at that young age will never go away. But I take inspiration from the work he has done, and that we are working as a family to make sure that his legacy continues. And we do that annually through the Walter Rodney Symposium. We do it through a Walter Rodney Speaker Series. We do different events. We work with different groups, youth groups in Africa. So that's what we do as a family, to ensure that we are giving back to the communities who have supported us.
In any way we could be of connection and assistance to doing so, it would be an honor. You have been amazing in speaking to and having a delight. I'm trying to be respectful of time and keep to your hour. But one of the most sweetest things I heard, and I just want to leave it with the energy of how I know your husband's still with you, is when you said you were tussling with your one of your granddaughters, and she went outside, and you saw her just looking at the sky. And when you came back, she's like, "What you doing?" And she's like, "I'm telling Granddad you were being mean to me." And
Yeah,
I
that's
thought that
Asian.
was the sweetest thing ever. And I would have been like, "And what he say back?" Because that's why you walked in the house.
She's now 13 years old. Yeah,
Yeah.
my
And
first one.
they're the ones though that are like, I always said, youth are the closest connected to their past life, right? Their
Yes,
ancestral self. So
yes,
they're much more in
in
tune
tune.
before we put them through the rigmarole to get
Yeah,
back to being in tune, right?
yes.
And to be that able, like, because my daughter does stuff or whatever, and I can understand that, but to be that able to still have that connection,
Mm-hmm.
have those conversations,
Yes.
that's an energy that meant exactly what he was doing when he was here, and knew no matter what, I'm here still.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad in my, at least my adulthood, I'm hearing about this book. He is on my Amazon wish list. It is
Mm-hmm.
coming to me. I am a nerd and I actually have a budget for books. So,
Mm-hmm.
so I just want to thank you again. And I think we could find you on LinkedIn, but is there any
Yes.
other way of finding you?
No, that's the best way.
Best way. Okay, so everyone, you can find Dr. Patricia Rodney at LinkedIn. We appreciate the honor of you being on the platform, and thank you for letting me have the opportunity to speak with you. Um, and I just find that I'm a very vibrational and energy thing. And I think some of the things I called out, basically, like, I come from medicine, you do medicine, my date of birth, the date of age, meeting you. I just find that when certain things to remind you and say, hey, you're doing a good job, I hope we will continue to make you and others proud in the works that you have done for your life.
Thank you so much. This was a pleasure talking to you this morning. And good luck
Same
in your
here.
own work. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So I
Bye-bye.
will let you, bye-bye. Guys, thank you so much for being here. That was an amazing conversation with the just honorable, that's all I could say, Dr. Patricia Rodney. Tuna Checky TV, thank you for watching us. All of our audience, you tune in, just you're gracious. I love your engagement. Keep coming in with your comments, like, subscribe, share, and we'll continue to throw out great content to you, and anything that helps us show you through others, which is actually one of my tags too. So I'll give you back to the same tag I leave with good night, good morning, and good afternoon, wherever you are. Take care and have a good day. Revolutionary African leadership. I'm just gonna pop up this last message. Yes, yes. On that note, take care, guys. We're gonna close out.